Jamie Kern Lima built an empire on truth. From beauty mogul to best-selling author, her entire brand is built around one thing: authenticity. So when Meghan Markle appeared on her podcast, most fans expected a powerful, honest conversation between two women who'd both battled the odds to build something real. But what they got instead was something else entirely. The interview went live, and at first it looked like a success: a duchess and a self-made billionaire. What could go wrong? But as the comments rolled in, a darker narrative began to take shape. Viewers weren't inspired, they were angry. The episode was called fake, tone-deaf, and carefully scripted propaganda. And in the center of the storm, Jamie, blindsided, silent, and suddenly accused of selling out her own values. So what actually happened on that podcast? Was Jamie Kern Lima really forced to play along with Meghan Markle's carefully curated persona? And how did one interview spiral into a full-blown backlash that left both women's reputations bruised, but only one of them walking away untouched? This is the story of how Jamie Kern Lima's authenticity collided with Meghan Markle's media machine, and why that single moment might have changed everything. Before we dive into what happened, let's talk about who Jamie Kern Lima is, because understanding her story is the key to understanding why this backlash hit so hard. Jamie's not your average billionaire. She didn't inherit a dynasty or marry into power. She started from nothing. She was working as a waitress at Denny's, struggling to make ends meet, when she began developing a makeup product in her living room. Not in a fancy lab, but in between night shifts and bills she wasn't sure she could pay. That product became IT Cosmetics. And after getting rejected by countless investors, most of whom told her she didn't look the part of a beauty CEO, Jamie landed a deal on QVC that changed her life overnight. Her authenticity, her vulnerability, and her refusal to fit into the mold is what connected with millions of women. She cried on air. She showed her real skin. She talked openly about self-doubt, about being underestimated, about building something that didn't just sell beauty, but represented it. By the time she sold her company to L'Oreal for over $1 billion, Jamie wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a symbol of perseverance, of integrity, of what happens when you stay true to who you are. And that's why when she launched her podcast, fans were excited. They trusted her. They believed that every conversation would be real, unscripted, and full of the raw truth Jamie had always been known for. So when Meghan Markle appeared on the show, expectations were sky high. Two powerful women, both shaped by public scrutiny, both with stories to tell. It should have been electric. But instead, something felt off. From the moment the episode dropped, there was a strange energy. Meghan Markle entered the conversation with the same polished tone she's used in most of her public appearances. It was refined, articulate, and completely detached. Instead of vulnerability, she delivered well-rehearsed anecdotes about empowerment, womanhood, and finding her voice. There was a moment, and fans caught it, when Meghan talked about redefining what it means to be a woman in power. But it wasn't the words that felt off. It was the way she said it, like she'd said it 100 times before, like she was reading from a PR script, not speaking from the heart. Jamie, usually deeply engaged and emotionally present, smiled and nodded. She praised Meghan's strength. She validated every point. But longtime listeners noticed something. She wasn't asking the real questions, the ones she usually asks. No deep dives, no pushback, no emotion. It felt like she was holding back, and that's when the speculation started. Viewers began wondering, was Jamie Kern Lima told what she could and couldn't say? Rumors started swirling that Meghan's team had pre-approved the topics, and that Jamie was strongly encouraged to avoid anything even slightly controversial. Some even claimed Meghan had a list of words that weren't allowed. Anything that might cast her in a negative light was reportedly off-limits. If true, that would mean this wasn't a conversation, it was a performance, and the audience felt it hard. The backlash was immediate. Social media lit up with criticism. "This isn't the Jamie we know," one commenter wrote. Another said, "Felt like Meghan took over the platform to promote her agenda. Jamie just sat there." One viral tweet put it bluntly: "Meghan came off fake, Jamie came off weak." That was the beginning of a narrative that would only get worse, and fast, because as more people watched the episode, the disappointment turned to anger, and Jamie, the woman who'd built her brand on truth and transparency, was suddenly accused of silencing herself to protect someone else's image. As the backlash escalated, more questions surfaced, not just about the episode itself, but about what went on before the cameras even started rolling. Insiders close to the production began to speak out, anonymously at first. One claimed that Meghan's team had submitted a detailed outline of conversation expectations before the interview, not suggestions, but firm boundaries. These reportedly included wrong topics, red flag phrases, and even a list of off-limits narratives. Among them, anything referencing Meghan's controversies with the royal family, public criticism of her Archetypes podcast, or her rumored feuds with other celebrities. If this is true, it changes the whole tone of the interview. It wasn't a collaboration. It was a controlled appearance, where Jamie was allegedly instructed to stay in safe territory, praise Meghan's empowerment messaging, and avoid anything that might cause tension. One anonymous podcast staffer claimed Jamie was visibly frustrated behind the scenes. According to the source, Jamie wanted to ask the tough questions about the backlash Meghan faced after archetypes, about the mixed public reaction to her brand, even about the contradictions in Meghan's public and private image. But apparently she was told not to, not directly, but through legal language that made it clear any deviation could risk legal or PR consequences. So Jamie, who built her name by being raw and real, sat across from someone wrapped in media armor and had to pretend it was authentic. This wasn't just a letdown. To fans who knew Jamie's story, the real Jamie, it felt like betrayal. And while Meghan was no stranger to controversy, Jamie's reputation was something different. It was clean, protected, trusted, until now. At first, the criticism was subtle, a few disappointed comments, a couple of critical TikToks, but within 24 hours, it snowballed, and Jamie Kern Lima became the unexpected target of digital outrage. What started as disillusionment became full-on backlash. Her name trended on Twitter next to hashtags like #WokeSellout and Jamie Lost Us. Reddit threads exploded, with longtime fans saying they felt deceived, heartbroken, and let down by someone who always promised to keep it real. One comment went viral: "We followed Jamie because she was one of us. Now she's just another puppet for Hollywood PR." People weren't just disappointed in the content. They felt Jamie had been complicit in promoting a false narrative, in giving Meghan a platform to deliver what viewers saw as manufactured empowerment without any meaningful discussion. Jamie, knowingly or not, had lent her credibility to what many called a performance. And while Meghan walked away untouched, as usual wrapped in her own PR echo chamber, Jamie was left facing the fallout. Sales of her latest book, Worthy, reportedly took a hit in the days following the podcast release. Pre-orders dipped, engagement across her social media platforms dropped. She lost trust, not from haters, but from her core audience, the people who had followed her through every struggle and believed she was one of the few celebrities who actually meant what she said. To them, this podcast wasn't just a bad episode. It was a turning point. Worse, Jamie didn't respond. Not at first, no apology, no explanation, just silence. And in that silence, the narrative hardened. She sold out. She knew what she was doing. And now she's trying to ignore the mess she helped create. But the truth, as always, was more complicated than the headlines. Because behind the scenes, Jamie was caught in a storm she didn't ask for, and maybe couldn't escape from. While the internet raged, Jamie Kern Lima stayed quiet. Not a tweet, not an Instagram story, nothing. To many fans, this silence was its own kind of statement, and not a good one. But what most people didn't see was what was happening behind the scenes. Sources close to Jamie began leaking small pieces of the story. According to one former team member, Jamie was emotionally devastated by the response. She hadn't expected the podcast to be a viral hit, but she definitely hadn't expected it to become a target for digital outrage. And it wasn't just about the numbers, it was personal. Jamie had poured years into building her reputation as someone who never played games, who spoke from the heart, who never caved to what was popular or safe. She had finally found her voice, only to have it stripped away in a single episode. One insider revealed that after the backlash hit, Jamie broke down in a private team meeting. She reportedly said, "I didn't want it to go like this. I wasn't allowed to ask the real questions. I tried to make it work, but my hands were tied." If true, that changes everything. It suggests Jamie didn't sell out. She was cornered. Maybe she saw the red flags. Maybe she knew Meghan's answers were surface level. But when you're sitting across from one of the most protected public figures in the world, with legal teams, PR agents, and corporate partners watching, what can you really do? Some reports even claim that Jamie tried to re-edit the episode after the taping, hoping to steer the tone back towards something more real. But Meghan's team allegedly pushed back, insisting that the integrity of the original conversation be respected. In other words, Jamie may have been held hostage by the brand she tried to collaborate with, a brand more focused on image than quality. And the worst part? The emotional cost wasn't just temporary. According to one close friend, Jamie felt like she let down everyone who believed in her, and she didn't know how to fix it. Because once you lose the trust of your audience, it's not something you can just buy back. Jamie Kern Lima didn't just lose face. She risked losing everything her brand stood for, and the ripple effect was immediate. Her book, Worthy, had just hit the market. It was meant to be a bold next step in her journey, not a self-help gimmick, but a deeply personal call for women to know their value, speak their truth, and trust their intuition. It should have been her biggest win since selling IT cosmetics. Instead, the Meghan Markle episode overshadowed the launch entirely. Review bombings began popping up. Some said the book now felt hypocritical, pointing to quotes about speaking up even when it's uncomfortable and honoring your inner voice, while contrasting that with Jamie's perceived silence on the podcast. On social media, Jamie's once loyal audience became increasingly divided. Some urged compassion, calling out Meghan's alleged manipulation, but others were ruthless, insisting Jamie had crossed a line, even if unintentionally. Influencers who had previously partnered with Jamie's brand started quietly distancing themselves. A few removed podcasts podcast links or book endorsements from their bios. And while there was no official cancellation, the vibe had shifted, subtly but undeniably. The podcast itself also took a hit. Engagement dropped on new episodes. Longtime listeners began tuning out, saying the trust had been broken. One listener commented, "I used to listen to Jamie to hear something raw. Now it feels like any other polished PR show." But this wasn't just about one episode. It was about identity. Jamie built a career on being different from the noise, and for a moment she looked just like the rest of them. What she may not have realized is that in today's world, one moment of perceived inauthenticity can erase years of trust. It doesn't matter if the intention was pure. The audience sees what it sees, and once the damage is done, it spreads fast. And while Meghan continued on, untouched by the controversy, Jamie was left cleaning up the pieces of a brand she never meant to compromise. But the big question remained: would she stay silent forever? Or would she finally say what really happened? As the dust settled, the contrast between Jamie and Meghan couldn't have been clearer. Meghan Markle, no stranger to controversy, walked away unscathed, or at least seemingly indifferent. There were no clarifications, no public statements. She continued her public appearances, her branding efforts, and her carefully curated media strategy without skipping a beat. To her team, it was business as usual. Another podcast, another press cycle. Meghan had played her part, delivered her talking points, and moved on. But for Jamie, the damage lingered. Weeks passed before she made her first public acknowledgement, and when she did, it wasn't some dramatic tell-all. It came during a quiet moment, buried in a longer podcast monologue about disappointments and learning to trust your voice again. She didn't name names. She didn't directly address Meghan, but what she said spoke volumes. There are moments when you feel like you've betrayed yourself, not because you lied, but because you stayed quiet when your heart screamed to speak. For those who were paying attention, that was it. That was the moment. A subtle admission, buried between the lines, that Jamie hadn't been allowed to be herself, and that the cost of silence was heavier than anyone could have predicted. It wasn't a full confession, but it didn't need to be. The message was clear. Jamie Kern Lima wasn't complicit. She was cornered. And in a world where image often outweighs truth, that might have been the most honest thing she could say. In the end, this wasn't just a clash between two powerful women. It was a collision of values. Jamie Kern Lima built her name on authenticity, the messy, honest kind that doesn't always look polished. Meghan Markle built hers, controlled narratives, carefully curated appearances, and media-managed empowerment. Put them in a room together and it should have been a meaningful conversation. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. Because when authenticity meets image, image usually wins. But at what cost? Jamie tried to do what so many creators, podcasters, and influencers are pressured to do: go along to get along, to play it safe, to protect the brand, to avoid conflict. And for that, she paid the price. She learned, painfully, that silence can be just as loud as complicity, that playing nice with power can cost you your purpose, and that the very thing that made people trust her, her willingness to keep it real, is the one thing she must never sacrifice again. And maybe that's the real story here. Not about a duchess, not about a podcast, but about what happens when you let someone else speak over your voice, even when you know better. Because in the world of clicks, clips, and curated personas, truth is rare. And when it shows up, raw, unfiltered, and inconvenient, it's almost always the first thing to be silenced. But if this backlash taught Jamie anything, it's that next time she won't be quiet, and the world will be watching.